about the theory of interest. Interest is the price paid for the use of borrowed money or capital. When money is borrowed, interest is typically paid to the lender as a percentage of the principal, that is, the amount owed to the lender. Assets that are sometimes lent with interest include money, shares, and capital equipment, etc. in finance liens arrangements. Interest is calculated upon the value of the assets in the same manner as upon money. When entrepreneur takes money or asset from the owner of capital as loan and puts it into the production, he has to pay a price to the owner of the capital, which is called interest. Now, what are the differences between real and money interest rates? Nominal or money interest rate refers to the interest rate before taking inflation into account. In other words, it's the actual rate that borrowers pay to the lenders to use their money or assets. The real interest rate, on the other hand, is the rate of interest a lender receives after allowing for inflation. In the case of a loan, it is this real interest that the lender effectively receives. For example, if the lender is receiving 8% interest from the loan and the inflation rate is also 8%, then the effective or real rate of interest is 0. It can be described more formally by the Fisher equation, which states that the real interest rate is approximately the nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. Fisher equation can be written as 1 plus I equal to 1 plus R into 1 plus pi E, where I is the nominal, I is equal to nominal interest rate, R is equal to real interest rate, and pi E is equal to expected inflation rate. Now we multiply out the right hand side and subtract 1 from each side to obtain I equal to R plus pi plus R pi. If R and pi are small numbers, then R pi is a very small number and can safely be ignored. As an approximation, therefore, this equation implies I is approximately equal to R plus pi. That is, real interest rate is equal to nominal interest rate. Nominal interest rate is equal to real interest rate plus inflation, expected inflation rate. Now, first of all, we will discuss about the loanable funds theory of interest. The famous Swedish economist Knut Wicksell expounded the loanable funds theory of interest, also known as neoclassical theory of interest. It recognizes that money can play a disturbing role in the saving and investment processes and thereby causes variations in the level of income. The loanable funds are the sums of money supplied and demanded at any time in the money market. The supply of loanable funds is constituted by the savings S plus new money M. New money supply resulting from credit creation by commercial banks. Thus, total supply of loanable funds is equal to S plus M. Demand side of the loanable funds is determined by the demand for investment plus demand for hoarding money. So, demand for loanable funds is constituted by demand for investable fund I plus net hoarding H. Thus, total demand for loanable funds is equal to I plus H. According to the loanable funds theory, the rate of interest is determined when the demand for loanable funds, that is I plus H, and the supply of loanable funds, that is S plus M, balance each other. The loanable funds theory regards the rate of interest as the function of 4 variables: savings, investment, the desire to hoard, and the money supply, that is newly created money or bank credit. So symbolically, R is equal to function of I, S, H, M. Now, how can we derive the supply curve of loanable funds? Here in the first diagram, M curve stands for the supply of money or bank credit, including disordering, as shown in the figure. It slopes upward, indicating that supply of bank credit is interest elastic. That is, as interest rate increases, supply of bank credit increases. In the second diagram, S curve denotes the different amounts of saving available at different rates of rates of interest. It slopes upward, indicating that there is a direct relationship between the volume of savings and the rate of interest. The higher the rate of interest, the higher the volume of saving, and vice versa. So, in this figure, S plus M indicates the total supply of loanable funds available at different rates of interest. It is derived by combining the S and M curves by horizontal summation. So S plus M curve also slopes upwards, indicating that the higher the rate of interest, the higher the supply of loanable funds, and vice versa. How can we derive the demand curve for loanable funds? In the first diagram, the curve I stands for investment demand for savings. It slopes downward to represent an inverse relationship between the volume of investment and the rate of interest. This implies that the higher the rate of interest, the lower will be the investment demand, and vice versa. In the second diagram, the curve H represents the tendency to hoard money or the level of hoarding at different levels of rate of interest. It slopes downward, indicating that higher the rate of interest, the lower the hoarding or idle cash balances, and vice versa. The curve I plus H represents the total demand for loanable funds at different rates of interest. It has been obtained by combining together the I and H curves by horizontal summation. The I plus H curve also slopes downwards because the lower the rate of interest, the higher the demand for loanable funds, and vice versa. So, how can we determine the interest rate? The I plus H, that is loanable funds demand curve, and the S plus M, that is loanable funds supply curve, intersect at point E in this diagram, which indicates the level of market rate of interest ORE as shown in the figure. Thus, the rate of interest is determined by the intersection point between the demand for loanable funds and the supply of loanable funds. Now we will discuss about the liquidity preference theory of interest, which is propounded by Keynes. Liquidity preference means the demand for money to hold or the desire of the public to hold cash. Keynes defined interest as a reward for parting with liquidity for specified time. How much of his income or resources will a person hold in the form of ready money or cash or non-interest paying bank deposits, and how much will he part with or lend depends upon what Keynes calls his liquidity preference. Liquidity preference of a particular individual depends upon three motives: the transactions motive, the precautionary motive, and the speculative motive. The transactions motive relates to the demand for money or the need for money balances for the current transactions of the individuals and business firms. This amount will depend upon the size of the individual's income, the interval at which the income is received, and the methods of payments prevailing in the society. The precautionary motive for holding money refers to the desire of the people to hold cash balances for unforeseen contingencies like danger of unemployment, sickness, accidents, etc. The demand for money under this motive depends on size of income, nature of the person, and the farsightedness of the person. So the transaction and precautionary demand function taken together can be written as L1 is equal to function of I, and the transactions and precautionary demand curve L1 is upward rising towards right, signifying that the higher the level of income, the higher the transactions and precautionary demand for money, and vice versa. Now, under speculative motive, people want to keep money with them to take advantage of the changes in price of bonds and securities. People under speculative motive hold money in order to secure profit from future speculation of the bond market. Now there is an inverse relation between the price of bonds and the rate of interest. If at present the rate of interest is very high, then bond prices are very low. And in such a situation, the price of bonds and securities are expected to rise in the future. Therefore, individuals would like to buy bonds now, and hence the demand for holding cash diminishes. Thus, liquidity preference will be less at higher interest rates. Opposite things will happen if at present interest rate is very low. That is, bond prices are very high. In such a situation, the prices of bonds and securities are expected to fall in future. Therefore, individuals would like to sell bonds and hold money now. Hence, the demand for holding cash increases. That is, liquidity preference increases. So, therefore, there is also a negative relationship between the rate of interest and the liquidity preference. Thus, liquidity preference will be more at lower interest rates, and which can be written as a functional form as L2 is equal to function of R. Now, speculative demand for money L2 is downward sloping towards right, signifying that higher the rate of interest, the lower the speculative demand for money, and vice versa. Now, liquidity preference curve L2 becomes quite flat, that is perfectly elastic at the very low rate of interest OR double prime. It is a horizontal line beyond the point E double prime towards the right. This perfectly elastic portion of liquidity preference curve indicates the position of absolute liquidity preference of the people. This portion is also called the liquidity trap by the economists, because expansion of money supply gets trapped in the sphere of liquidity trap and therefore cannot affect the rate of interest and therefore cannot affect the level of investment, and therefore monetary policy is completely ineffective in this liquidity trap zone. Now, the total demand for money function can be written as L is equal to L1 plus L2, which can be written as L1Y plus L2R. L1Y denotes the transaction and speculative demand for money taken together, and L2 denotes the speculative transactions and precautionary demand for money taken together, and L2 denotes the speculative demand for money. So, but Keynes's additive form of demand for money function has now been rejected by the modern economists. According to them, demand for money cannot be divided into separate compartments independent of each other. Further, according to Tobin and Baumol, the transactions demand for money also depends upon the rate of interest. And hence, after taking into consideration all these modern views, Keynesian total demand for money function can be written as the following modified form: MD is equal to L of Y and R, which is the final functional form of Keynesian liquidity preference theory of interest. So, therefore, it is clear that the quantity of money demanded increases with the fall in the rate of interest and with the increase in the level of nominal income. At a given level of nominal income, we can therefore draw a money demand curve showing the quantity of money demanded at various rates of interest. As the demand for money is inversely related to the rate of interest, the money demand curve at a given level of income, say Y1, will be a downward sloping curve shown as the curve LP1 in the figure. LP1 for the level of income Y1. Now when the level of money income increases, suppose from Y1 to Y2, the curve of demand for money shifts upwards to the new position LP2.